Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. Allah willing, I'm going to compare the story of Abraham's sacrifice. We say this, I keep moving over to the to my left to try to center myself. Um, Abraham's sacrifice, we call it, I mean, those of us Christians, Jews, Muslims, and we're thinking about Abraham believing that he should sacrifice his son. And if you actually study the story, the sacrifice ultimately was of an animal. He sacrificed an animal after thinking that he was supposed to sacrifice his son. And the occasion for this is it 3 days ago? Uh, yeah, I think it's 4 days ago. Okay. 4 days ago was the 10th of the Hijjah, the last month of the Hijri calendar. Um, and the 10th day is Eid al-Adha, Eid al-Adha, the day of sacrifice. And it's an observance during the pilgrimage season. The Hajis, the pilgrims are assembled in Mecca, and this is the day in which they observe the memory of Abraham's sacrifice. Very important. As a matter of fact, there are two Eids, two days of observation. There's Eid al-Fitr at the end of Ramadan, and there's Eid al-Adha. And this is called the Greater Eid. This is the big one, okay? Um, and so the Muslims are assembled, and quite often the talk that is given and the order of things of the service is the reverse of the order during uh, I'm sorry, senior moments of Jum'ah. The Jum'ah Salah um, is the Imam gives a talk called a khutbah, which means a talk. Um, and after the talk, which should be brief, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, um, it's really impossible to translate that. Um, Sallallahu means to give the greetings of peace, to wish peace on someone. Sallallahu. Uh, Basically, it's praying for Allah to purify him. So when we're purified, we're ready for paradise. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we say that it's a command in the Quran that we should pray for Prophet Muhammad. Um, he spoke for maybe 5 minutes or so, very little. Nowadays we have these imams who go on. If I was running late for the service, I would go to the masjid, the mosque. Masjid is the proper word. On 116th Street, Malcolm Shabazz Masjid, because I knew that the imam there would go on and on and on for over an hour. So if I was running late, I'd say, well, let me go there, and then I won't miss the service. But Muhammad himself spoke for maybe 5 minutes or so. And when I first heard this, the imam said that we, talking to us sitting in the congregation, I happened to be in Boston on that occasion. He said that we were so hard headed that he had to talk for over an hour, which he proceeded to do. We were hard headed, not him. We were hard headed. Um, Muhammad, we're supposed to follow his example. His example was 5 minutes or so. And then the salah, when we perform salah, It's not prayer. It's salah. We don't have an English word for that, but why don't we just say salah? It's what we do quite often in English speaking people. We have a lot of words that we have brought in from Greek and Latin and Hebrew and Arabic because, we didn't have words in the English language for those concepts. The word like galaxy, it's a Greek word. Well, why don't we use an English word? Well, we didn't have an English word, so we brought in a Greek word. So similarly, if we're going to talk about the what we do when we stand up and bow down and prostrate ourselves and to glorify the one who created the entire vastness of the cosmos and created everything, created us, created time, created space. Um, when we perform that ritual, I guess you could call it, it's it's salah. It's salah. Um, and we just bring the word into English and we'll understand what it is from seeing it or doing it. When we are standing up in Salat, we are reciting the words of the Quran and nothing else. And that's it. Okay. When we say, okay, so the Imam gives the talk and then we do Salah. And when Muhammad did this, the talk was short and Salah was about the same length or longer than the talk. Okay, we have so-called imams who can't even read the word of Allah. It took me about 2 years, um, of devoted effort to learn to read the word of Allah. Now, in the Eid, the order is reversed. We do the Salah first, and then the Imam gives a talk. And hopefully the talk will also be short. But we know how it is. They go on and on and on. There's actually an old spiritual with the words in it, oh, save us from the preachers. So at any rate, so that day it coincided with the 6th of June. And it also came on a Friday, which is Yawmul Jum'ah, the day of gathering. That's a coincidence. I'm not talking theologically. I'm just saying it happened to be the same time, which it is not most of the time. Most of the time, it's some other day of the week, but it happened to coincide with the day of Yawmul Jum'ah, of the Jum'ah services. Um, so this is the day where we observe the sacrifice of Abraham. So I'm going to read some years ago. As a matter of fact, it was 18 years ago. I just committed myself to reading the entire King James version of the Bible, and I had a schedule that I would have finished it in a year. The Bible is much longer than the Quran. I've read the Quran, the entire Quran, within a month on many occasions. And Prophet Muhammad, wasallam, in order to slow his followers down, there were no people calling themselves Muslims when Muhammad first received revelation, when it came down to him. The angel Gabriel brought down the words of Allah. Allah did not speak directly to Muhammad. He spoke directly to Moses, alayhi salam, upon him be peace, but he did not speak directly to Muhammad. Um, we can reflect on that. Why? I don't know. Allah knows. Um, but he sent the angel, the same angel, which Christians also refer to as the Holy Spirit or the Holy Ghost, Holy Spirit. They mean ghost in the sense of spirit. Um, and then they really fancy it up. It's like taking eggs that you could fry whole, but instead, you're going to scramble the eggs, So we get this whole thing all scrambled up. The Holy Spirit. We're talking about the angel Gabriel. Brought the word to Muhammad, just as he brought the word to Maryam, alayhi salam, upon her be peace, that she was going to have a child without the benefit of a man. according to what Allah has told us. There was no man. Allah is not a man, never was, never will be. There's nothing like Allah, nothing whatsoever like Allah, the creator of the heavens and the earth. But at any rate, I had this schedule, and as usual, I procrastinated and I didn't finish for 4 years instead of 1 year, 4 years. But alhamdulillah, praise be to Allah, I did finish the entire King James Bible from the beginning of Genesis to the end of Revelation of Apocalypse, the Revelation of John, the last book. So that book is a letter. Says at the very beginning, it's a letter from John to the seven churches of Asia. By Asia, where Turkey is today, that was called Asia in those days, and it's a letter from John to the churches of Asia. Okay, I say that because the Quran is the words of Allah directly to us, to Muhammad. It is not a letter or writing of Muhammad. It is from Allah. So I'm going to read something I haven't read. I don't think I've read it in years. I know I haven't read it in years. And so I haven't, this is my first time reading this in years. This is in Genesis, the 22nd chapter. And this is about the sacrifice of Abraham. Okay? Chapter 22. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham. And he said, Behold, here I am. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and after him, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. And Abraham rose up early in the morning, and saddled his ass, and took two of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up, and went unto the place of which God had told him. Then on the third day Abraham lifted up his eyes, and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said unto his young men, Abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship, and come again unto you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering, and laid it upon Isaac his son, and he took the fire in his hand, and a knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said, My father. And he said, Here I am, my son. And he said, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? And Abraham said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together. And they came to the place which God had told him of. And Abraham built an altar there, and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched forth his hand, and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven, and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here am I. And he said, Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him, for now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram, and offered him up for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. And Abraham called the name of that place Jehovah Jireh, as it is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. And the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham out of heaven a second time, and said, by myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore, and thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. And Abraham returned unto his young men, and they rose up and went together to Beersheba. Beersheba. And Abraham dwelt at Beersheba. And I will stop there. That's the 19th verse of the 22nd chapter. Okay, there are a number of things. Um, One is there's a contradiction at the very beginning. Um, uh, Supposedly, the Lord uh, told Abraham, take thy son, thine only son. Well, before this, before chapter 22, Abraham had a son by Hagar. She's called Hagar in the Bible. Um, I'm trying to remember the Arabic version, Hajar. Hajar. She's not mentioned by name in the Quran, but he had a son. His firstborn was Ishmael. So it says here that Isaac is his only son. So I want to point this out because what Muslims in particular should reflect on, and Christians and Jews, the Christians know, at least they ought to know, that Christians put the Bible together. Okay? Christians wrote the Bible. Well, they didn't even call themselves Christians then. They were not called Christians. They did not call themselves Christians until later. Um, but if Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, uh, Paul, John, who wrote the book of Revelation, and others, it is this is the New Testament. It's made perfectly clear that men wrote these books. Okay, men wrote them. Uh, so it is not so clear in the Old Testament. Um, the Jews, like the Christians, say this is the Word of God. The Jews say that this is the revelation from God, but in my reading, I didn't notice any place where God Himself speaks. If you read the Quran, the Arabic Quran, um, over and over and over again, we are hearing directly from the Creator of the heavens and earth. One of my favorite ayat, I prefer to use the term ayah, singular, ayat, plural, which can be translated into English as sign. Um, a sign like dark clouds or a sign of rain, or a stop sign, right? You're driving along, you come to a stop sign, um, and it means stop. And the word ayah means sign in both of those senses. And Allah also uses it to refer to those little units in the message, which we call verses. I don't like to use that term. I prefer to call them ayah, ayat. Um, One of my favorite uh, ayat is in in the 76th Surah. Surah Dahr. Dahr means time, one of the words for time. Uh, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. We seek refuge with Allah from the rejected Satan when we recite from the Quran. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We say with the name, all these translations are so inadequate. Name, like that planet up there we call Mars. It had Asma, that's the plural of Ism, the Isma name, Asma. It had Asma long before there were people around to call it something, right? So to say in the name, it's not uh, a reasonable translation. But at any rate, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, with the name of Allah, with the name of the Beneficent, the Merciful. And we say that when we recite from the Quran, okay? أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا نحن نزلنا عليك القرآن تنزيلا صدق الله العظيم. We say صدق الله العظيم when we finish reading Quran. صدق means he was truthful and accurate. صدق الله العظيم, the magnificent, al-Azim. صدق الله العظيم. So you know that ayat, inna, surely we, nahnu, we, nazalna, we cause to come down, alayka, upon you, you singular. So we understand that he's talking to Muhammad specifically. Much of the Quran is directed specifically to Muhammad. Okay. Um, إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْقُرْآنَ, upon you al-Quran. So the Quran refers to itself. Nowhere in the biblical scriptures do they refer to themselves. Okay, they refer to other books, books that have been lost, that the children of Israel had before the biblical scriptures. But it's not self-referential, shall we say. The Quran is self-referential. إنا نحن نزلنا عليك القرآن تنزيلا. Tanzila, Nazalna, and Tanzila, two different versions of the word meaning to come down, right? Tanzila is used the way we use words we call adverbs in English, right? It modifies the verb that came before it. Nazalna tanzila. So we cause it to come down, coming down. You know, it's repetitive, but there's a reason for it. I'm not going to say I know why, but inna nahnu nazzalna alayka al-Qur'ana tanzila, and Allah uses the royal we quite often. Inna nahnu, surely we cause to come down the Quran upon you, Muhammad, coming down. So Allah is speaking to us directly in the Quran. This is not true in the biblical scriptures. For instance, here it says, and it came to pass after these things, the things that came before chapter 22, that God did tempt Abraham. So it's talking about God, right? This isn't God speaking. This is someone who wrote this talking about God. So anyway, there's that contradiction. You know, that Isaac was not Abraham's firstborn and at no time was his only son. So uh, let me go to the Quran. And one of the things about the Quran, you know, I'm constantly digressing and interrupting myself, but I was walking along Gun Hill Road in the Bronx one day, and I saw a book on the ground. And of course, I love books, right? I love books. I will admit I do not have a copy, to my knowledge, a copy of Mein Kampf, Hitler's book. I have at least one book that's a biography of Hitler that I've read part of. The man, poor, sad, insane man. Sound like someone we know? Poor, sad, insane man. Um, uh, who was beaten so often, so terribly by his father. Oh man, oh man, oh man. These are things we need to pay attention to. We never know, you know. Some terribly abused person will become the leader of a nation and cause havoc. Okay. But I love books. I saw a book lying on the sidewalk, and lo and behold, it was a Bible, the version of the Bible that the Jehovah's Witnesses use. Okay. And I picked it up. I you know, I took it home. I mean, I just, you know, I mean, I don't have the same regard for the Bible as many Muslims do. Uh, Inappropriately, I would say, but still, just to have a Bible tossed away and left lying on the ground was, it just bothered me. And I picked it up and took it home. Um, and I forget where I was going with that. But at any rate, this is the Quran. Um, and I'm beginning in the middle of the 37th surah. And I say surah instead of chapter. Chapter resembles the word chopped, chopped. The biblical scriptures are chopped up into chapters, with the exception of at least the book of Psalms, where each chapter is a psalm, right? It stands by itself. It's a psalm, like the 23rd Psalm, right? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, and so forth. I had memorized that when I was a child. Um, but the most, almost all of the other biblical books are chopped up into chapters so that, there's a continuing narrative, but it's chopped up, right? So the Quran is divided into surahs, which are not chapters. They should not be called chapters. It's misleading. So I prefer to use the word that is used in the Quran itself, which is surah. Surah. There are 114 surahs in the Quran, ranging from extremely long. The second surah, it would take you uh, over an hour and a half at a reasonable rate to recite the entire surah. Over an hour and a half. And then the surahs get shorter and shorter. Generally, it's not mechanical. Generally, they get shorter and shorter until you come to a few surahs towards the very end of the Quran that it won't even take you 10 seconds to recite the entire surah. As a matter of fact, by way of example, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. صدق الله العظيم. Did that take 10 seconds? I don't know. I wasn't timing myself. But that's the entire surah. Excuse me, entire surah. I get Qad and Sin mixed up. They're similar letters in Arabic, but they are different letters. And this is surah, not surah. Surah. Um, that's the 103rd surah of the Quran. There are 114 surahs, so that's one of the last. Um, it has 4 ayat. The second surah has 286 ayat. 286. But at any rate, this is a 37th surah. It has 182 uh, surahs, which is unusual for a surah that is so far back in the Quran. But um, the ayat are not always the same length. So this surah is not particularly long. But in the middle of the surah, Allah talks about Noah, who was one of the early prophets, not the earliest, but one of the early prophets. And I'm sorry, I just love all of this so much. Um, I'm trying to find it. Yeah. Um, like earlier in this surah, وَلَقَدْ نَادَانَا نُوحٌ فَنِعْمَ الْمُجِيبُونَ. And surely we we call to Noah, and he's blessed of those who are sent. I believe that's what Mujibun means. Mujib. I've had friends named Mujib. Um, um, yes, this is the ayat I was looking for. Salamun ala Nuhun fil alameen. Peace upon Noah in al-alameen, the worlds or the nations. Alameen comes from a word meaning the word which is translated as knowledge, and how alameen, which is a plural, alameen, alam, alim, yeah, alameen. I'm not sure what it used to be translated as nations, and then it's translated as worlds. And obviously it means something, special, but those translations don't do it justice. Um, and then Allah goes on to say, وَأَنَّ مِنْ شِيعَتِهِ لَإِبْرَاهِيمَ, and then among his sect, we call it his sect, his community, Shia, um, is Abraham. Okay, and then it goes on to say a few things about Abraham, and then when we get to the 100th, Abraham says to Allah, Rub. It's usually translated as Lord, which is misleading. I mean, there's a whole history behind use of the word Lord in the King James version. A lot of people are called Lord, my Lord, my Lord. We bow down to them, and Rub, uh, uh, to translate it that way, just brings up ugly things. But Rab habli min. So Abraham is saying to his Rab, uh, bless me with someone from among the Salih. Salih means those who do good, right? So here we get to the part. فبشرناه بغلام حليم فلما بلغ فلما بلغ معه السعي قال يا بني إني أرى في المنام أني أذبحك فانظر ماذا ترى قال يا أبت افعل ما تؤمر ستجدني إن شاء الله من الصالحين. Well, I read three ayat. So at any rate, for Besheth Nahu, and we gave him good tidings of a ghulam, a wonderful young man, Halim, Halim, uh, one of these days I won't be able to speak English anymore. Halim, forbearing, gentle, kind. I think it means that. فلما بلغ معه السعي قال يا بني إني أرى في المنام أني أذبحك فانظر ماذا ترى. Okay, so when he reached his maturity, okay, when he reached it, when his son reached his maturity, you notice he's not named, okay, not named. When he reached his maturity, uh, Abraham. It's quite often in the Quran, and I think you may have seen that in the biblical version. It says he said, and we have to figure out who is he talking about, right? He said, "Oh, my son, surely I see fil manam in in the sleep, in well, as people translate it as the vision." But manam comes from the same root as now, meaning sleep. Some people translate it as dream. Okay? فِي الْمَنَامِ أَنِّي مَعَكُمْ أَنِّي أَذْبَحُكَ فَانظُرْ مَاذَا تَرَىٰ. فِي الْمَنَامِ, I see in the manam that I should sacrifice you. So, what do you see? It's kind of a strange question to ask. You're about to, I'm supposed to sacrifice you. What do you think? You know, uh, Qala, so his son, Qala, yeah, abatif al maru. He says to his father, do what you are ordered to do. So Saturday, insha'Allah min al-sabirin. You will find me, Allah willing, among those who are patient. Okay. فلما أسلم وتله للجبين وناديناه أن يا إبراهيم قد صدقت الرؤيا إنا كذلك نجزي المحسنين. So when he had Aslama, when he had put him on the place of sacrifice, وناديناه أن يا إبراهيم, And we said, we called to him, we. Now, the we here is not absolutely clear because quite often Allah speaks to us in the royal we, right? وَنَادَيْنَاهُ, and we called him, yeah, Ibrahim, yeah, and yeah, Ibrahim, O Abraham, قَدْ فَدَقْتَ الرُّؤْيَا, فَدَقْتَ الرُّؤْيَا, you have fulfilled the ru'ya, not the manam, the ru'ya. Ru'ya comes from the word ru'a, meaning he sees, right? He sees with his eyes, sees, right? فَدَقْتَ الرُّؤْيَا, and I would understand this to mean you have fulfilled the vision, okay? The other thing that Abraham saw was the manam. Okay, this is al-ru'ya, the vision. إِنَّا كَذَلِكَ نَجْزِي الْمُحْسِنِينَ, and surely we, like that, reward those who do good. إِنَّ هَذَا لَهُ الْبَلَاءُ الْمُبِينُ, and that was a clear test. فَدَيْنَاهُ بِذِبْحٍ عَظِيمٍ, and we provided him with a wonderful sacrifice. وَتَرَكْنَا عَلَيْهِ فِي الْآخِرِينَ, Taraka, we made him among those who follow. Salam ala Ibrahim, the same thing that he had said about Noah. Salam ala Nuh, right? Salam ala Ibrahim, peace be upon Abraham. كذلك نجزي المحسنين, and like that we reward those who do good. إنه من عبادنا المؤمنين, surely he is he is among our servants, those who believe. وَبَشَّرْنَاهُ بِإِسْحَاقَ, this is the son who is mentioned by name. وَبَشَّرْنَاهُ بِإِسْحَاقَ نَبِيًّا مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ, and we gave him good tidings of Isaac, a prophet among those who are good. وَبَارَكْنَا عَلَيْهِ وَعَلَى إِسْحَاقَ, and we blessed him and Isaac. ومن ذرية من نخلم وقوم لنفتهم مبين, ومن those who follow those two, مقصن وقوم لنفتهم مبين, those who do good and those who do bad, clearly upon themselves. At any rate, I use what I call the baby method in learning to read the Quran. Babies come here, they don't have a language, right? When they're upset, they cry. We have to figure out what's wrong, what's wrong. One of the pins in the diaper came loose and it's sticking him. Well, we have to figure that out. He doesn't know how to say that. He has no language, but somehow we learn a language, the language of our mothers, call it the mother tongue, the language of our mothers and fathers and others. We learn that. And so what I do is I read the Quran over and over and over and over again. And in time, I come to understand, largely by context, because I was raised on the Bible. So when it talks about Moses and Abraham and Noah and everything, I get a lot of meaning because I'm familiar with the context, right? I'm familiar with the context. And so and a lot of it, well, at any rate, I use the baby method. So a lot of times I'm looking at this and I'm saying, well, what does that mean? I'm not really sure. I'm doing the best I can, but I would rather know that I don't know than to read a dictionary or to read a translation and think that I know what this means, when in actual fact, I don't know what it means, and neither did the dictionary person or people, and neither did the translator. They didn't know what it meant. They did the best they could. May Allah bless them. But Allah knows what it means. There are things in the Quran that there is an ayah in the Quran. وَسَمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ. Now, less than 100 years ago, less than 1 century ago, we learned that the cosmos is expanding, right? We learned that it's expanding. Now I read the Quran over and over and over again, and one day I read this ayah. وَسَمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ. And the sky, sama, means the sky. And it comes from the same root as Isma, which we translate as name. Name, sky. I mean, how do these relate? But if you actually read the words of Allah, you come to a deeper or higher understanding, right? وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ. We built it. We have an it in English. There's no it in Arabic. Ha means her or she. بَنَيْنَاهَا, we built her. Well, بَنَيْنَاهَا, in English we say it. بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ, with hands, was clear. It means powers, forces. Like one of my favorite verses in the Bible is that the king of Assyria reached out his hand and smote Israel. Well, we know that the king didn't reach out his hand and smack, Israel. He sent his forces, right? So when I now have the Aiden, Yad is hand, Aid is the plural of the Aiden with hands, with forces. When I have the Aiden, we are those who cause expansion. Now, this was 14 centuries ago. This had been preserved. The Quran had been preserved in its exact form for 14 centuries, because when we stand up in Salah, right, if an imam means the one who's in front, it doesn't mean a priest or what have you, men going around 24/7 being imam so-and-so. I have a friend, his name is, well, whatever his name is, but he insists on being called imam so-and-so. I said, what? He used to be the leader of a community, but if you're the leader, you can be called imam because that's the one who's in front, right? So the imam is reciting the Quran, and if he deviates, if he makes a mistake, if he has a memory lapse, those who have memorized the Quran, who are standing behind him in Salah, will say Subhanallah. And I can't translate that either, but basically it means Allah alone is perfect, right? And they will correct him. They will supply him with what he needs by way of correction, or if he's had a memory lapse, what it was that he needed to remember. And this has been going on for 14 centuries all over the world. And living in New York City was like traveling the world, because I stood up in Salah behind imams from, I'll lose count, Egypt, the other Arab nations, Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, from Guyana in South America, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Bosnians, at least one Bosnian, I believe, and of course people from India and Pakistan, and Indonesia. I don't want to forget Indonesia. I've stood up and they're reciting. The Quran is exactly the same, unless they make an error. I was standing up in Salah behind a man from Pakistan who was a Hafiz. Hafiz means that he had memorized the entire Quran, but he was reciting a part of the Quran I had memorized, and he made a mistake. And so I said, Subhanallah, and supplied him with the correction. This has been going on for 14 centuries. Muslims have been reciting the same Quran no matter where they are from. They could be from China, they could be from South America, the islands of the Pacific. It doesn't matter. Living in New York, I heard the imams reciting the exact same Quran. It has been preserved in its exact same form for 14 centuries, in exactly the form that was left by Muhammad. The entire Quran was revealed to Muhammad, and before he died, he left that exact Quran with his followers. The entire thing, exactly from beginning to end, the exact Quran, it was left by Muhammad. So even if you don't believe in the Quran coming down from Allah by way of Gabriel, this is historical fact. It's not about faith or anything. This is historical fact. Muhammad brought the Quran to his people over a period of 23 years, and And shortly before he passed away, the revelation, and I don't like using that word, it came down. Revelation comes from the word reveal. It came down, right? Came down. I love that. Uh, it came down. It was complete. Okay, the coming down of the Quran was complete, and there were people who knew this. They heard the final words of that had come down to him, and there was Abu Bakr, one of his closest followers. Probably, I think I read that he broke into tears because he realized when he heard that, that his good friend, because they were good friends before Muhammad received the message. Um, he realized that Muhammad was not long for this world. His good friend was going to die, was going to pass away. He had finished the mission. Um, but at any rate, it had been preserved in this exact form for 14 centuries. So, what were people to make of this ayah? وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ. What were they to make of this ayah, saying, well, we are the ones who cause expansion? Now, I had read this several times when one day it dawned on me, the expansion of the cosmos, of course. What else can it be? I'm sure there are other meanings that we can get from this. But he says the sky, right? We look up, what are we looking at? And this astronomer, his name Hubble, right? And they have a telescope named after him because he's the one who discovered that the cosmos is expanding. This was less than 100 years ago, right? He discovered that the cosmos is expanding. Uh, that's not alhamdulillah. Um, and so, what's the matter? We look up at the sky, and after studying the sky, Allah opened up to us because we don't learn anything except Allah opens it up to us for us to learn. Um, that the cosmos is expanding at a fantastic rate. The further away things are, the faster they are moving away. And it's accelerating faster and faster, and it's expanding. And surely we are the ones that cause expansion. Right? 14 centuries ago. Has not been added, has not been changed. This is exactly what was sent down 14 centuries ago. So what were people to make of that? Okay, mashallah. So here we have this thing about Abraham. He'd been given a son. Now, if you go by the biblical chronology, Abraham must have been at least 85 years old. Can you imagine having a son when you're 85 years old? And especially in that society at that time, most children die in that day and age, all the way even up to the time of Muhammad. I don't know when or where this has changed, but most children die. They die. I mean, there's a Queen of England, Queen Anne. She's one of my heroes because she had 17 pregnancies, and almost all of them died when they were born. Before they were born, there were some who were dead in her womb. um, for I don't know, I think it was days before they were born. She had one child that lived to the age of 11. Um, and it wasn't that she and her husband, just loved to get it on, they were trying to produce a Protestant heir to the throne. That's the way it was in those days. This was excuse me, a matter of life and death. The people in England were killing each other over this, whether you followed the Pope of Rome or whether you followed the monarch of England. And so they had Protestant, they had monarchs who did not follow the Pope of Rome, and they wanted to have an heir to the throne who would not follow the Pope of Rome. And 17 pregnancies later, Queen Anne died without an heir. So they had to bring in a fellow named George from Hanover in Germany. So here you had England had a new king who was a Protestant and who couldn't speak English, and if the composer Handel, whose name also was George Frederick Handel, that was his boss. He had overstayed his leave of absence, and now his boss shows up, and is now the king of England, and the handle is in England. So he has to make up to his boss. But at any rate, the thing is that uh, children died. Um, and so here Abraham had no children, and this young man is born to him from Hagar, um, when he's an old man. And you can imagine, I mean, in that culture, you have no idea. I mean, we have no idea in America, how precious it is to have a son. Oh man, oh man, oh man. And I've seen Arabs with their sons, with young men generally. African Americans will look at this and say, something's funny going on here. But they are affectionate, they hug, they kiss. I mean, it's just a precious thing. And it's been that way for thousands of years. And so anyway, he had a son, and then he sees Phil Manam, right? I see in Manam, and his, my way of reading this is that he was asleep. We don't really trust what, in my sleep. I had, this happened in my sleep. Yeah, right. I see dead people. I'm left. My older brother is gone, my mother is gone, my father is gone, and I have dreams where they're just alive. Um, just ordinary living alive, nothing spooky about it and everything. But of course, it's a dream. I don't wake up and go looking for my brother or my mother or my father, you know. Um, it's a dream. As a matter of fact, I had a dream once about a fellow who has a significant place in my life, but I won't go into that. But uh, uh, and I saw an obituary, and the fellow had passed away, and and so I'm walking along somewhere in the Bronx, near the Bronx River houses and everything, and lo and behold, there he is, and so this is a dream, and he looks at me and he says, "Yeah," and he says, in effect, "Yeah, I know you thought I was dead, but nope, here I am," and he goes on walking, goes on his way, and of course it was a dream. I know the fellow is, at least according to the obituary, he's passed away, but it was that in the dream, he was reacting to the fact that I thought he was dead. But at any rate, we see things in our dreams. And what does that mean? Sometimes dreams are visions, especially for prophets. There are Muslims who think, well, because Abraham saw this in his manam, that is a vision, and the visions of the prophets come true. And I don't follow that. I think Abraham was asleep. He was asleep. In those days, uh, people sacrificed their children. I guess I must have read it when I read the King James version, but I actually saw this in Wikipedia that the prophet Jeremiah um, chastised his people because they were sacrificing their children. I'm talking about the house of Israel. They were sacrificing their children for Marduk, who was some deity that the people of that time and place considered a god. And they were sacrificing their children. Uh, and other people sacrificed their children. They sacrificed those precious to them. They sacrificed precious virgins. And they, I guess if their prayers weren't answered, they say, she was no virgin, just a slut. Bring me a virgin. But at any rate, sacrifice virgins, and among some people, especially here in the Western Hemisphere, they sacrifice their enemies. When you were captured, they kept you alive long enough to sacrifice you. And part of the problem, the people we call Aztecs, they call themselves a Mexica, like the nation Mexico is named after them. Um, they were sacrificing so many people. I mean, when the Spanish arrived, I mean, what are they, how can you survive and be ready to defend your nation when you sacrifice so many people? And the worse things got, the more people they would sacrifice, and the more people they would sacrifice, the worse things got. There's some author who wrote a play about that, but anyway, people's, all the way up until talking about physically sacrificing people, because we sacrifice people. It's happening right now. We have a president who's sacrificing people. He's sacrificing people. That's exactly what he's doing. He's sacrificing people for his gods. Capitalism, well, himself, of course, the idea that there's such a thing as a race, a separate race. There's only one race of Homo sapiens, only one. If you think there's more than one, you are caught up in a delusion that began with a lie, a deliberate, malicious lie, so that your people could be treated as inhumane. Okay? Um, there's only one race of human beings at this time. Up until about 40,000 years ago, there were two or three different, the Neanderthals, the Denisovans, or whatever we call them. But that's over, right? We have this one race of people, but they invented this. But that's another God, right? Um, so we have right now a president who's sacrificing people. People are suffering. They're going to die because this man is sacrificing people to his gods. Okay. But back then, people literally, physically, hands on, killed people. And they said they were doing it for their gods. The ancient Greeks, right? They had their gods living up on Mount Olympus, all of this kind of stuff. Um, So people were sacrificing people for their gods. So Abraham, he was asleep. Human beings, mankind, we were asleep, right? We were asleep. We thought that we need to sacrifice our children to please the gods, or in Abraham's case, the one God. So, when he told his son, this is what I got to do, his son said, okay, do what you got to do, Daddy. I'm patient, I will accept whatever you do. And so then, what does it say? Sajadani, فَلَمَّا أَسْلَمَا وَتَلَّهُ لِلْجَبِينِ. And when he was ready to sacrifice him, وَنَادَيْنَاهُ أَن يَا Ibrahim, and we called him. And now, at no point in this entire passage is the name Allah, or Ar-Rahman is also one of the names that is used as a personal name for Allah. I don't see it here. I don't see here. So it says Nahu, and we called him. We, is the we Allah, or is the we the angels? Oh, Abraham, yeah, you have fulfilled the vision. So the vision is that Abraham was willing to sacrifice his son. That's the vision. The dream, the unconsciousness, the primitiveness was Abraham thought that he had to sacrifice his son and that this would please God. Okay? And so we reward those who do good. And we provided him with a sacrifice. Okay, the sacrifice, of course, is an animal, and that is also of deeper meaning, right? We sacrifice our animal nature. We feel like doing all kinds of things. Man, if you knew what I feel like doing, you would stay away from me. But we, for your dear life's sake, I had roommates in college, and one day one of them realized, oh my goodness, I am in danger, and I was enjoying it. He was in terror, and I was enjoying the fact that my mental condition at that moment put his life in danger, and but we don't do it. We have these animal desires, and we are servants of Allah, and so we say, oh Allah, I won't do this because I am your servant. Okay, so. Anyway, so Allah provided him with a magnificent sacrifice, and so that's Abraham's sacrifice, right? To sacrifice his animal nature, right? And so we have the contrast between the biblical version, which is deliberately, and I will say this is a criticism of the Jews who put the Bible together, the Tanakh, from which we derive the Old Testament, that they deliberately wanted to demote Ishmael and promote Isaac, right? Because they are the descendants of Isaac. So they're saying, yes, Isaac, Isaac. So they raid up Isaac, 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 and demote Ishmael because, those other people, they're descended from Ishmael, and they virtually, well, she's a bondmaiden, Hagar. Um, and actually, it says here that Isaac is his only son. I mean, really? Uh, and it clearly says in the passages before that Ishmael had been born. By the time Isaac was born, if you go by both the Bible and the Quran, Ishmael had already come of age. I'm not talking about come of age, in this stupid society like 21 or 18 or whatever, right? I had come of age at least by the time I was 15, maybe 13. I had hair, a peach fuzz on my upper lip, which my mother didn't want to see. Kept telling me to wash my face. Wild, isn't it? But I mean, there was nobody to tell me that I had come of age. I didn't know what it was. So, we live in a crazy society. Oh, he's 18, he's come of age. He's 21, he's come of age. There's some people who are 21 and they still haven't come of age, right? I mean, it's sad. They shouldn't be blamed or anything. They need to be cared for. People who 18, that's more common. A lot of people 18 years old, they have no sense whatsoever. But biologically, we almost always come of age. By the time we're young teenagers, right? We have come of age. So what does that mean? That means that you're ready to do serious work. That's what it means. You're ready to do serious work. Uh, uh, so anyway, and so then Abraham worked with Ishmael to rebuild the house of Allah, which had crumbled to dust, and he went down there and joined Ishmael and his mother, and he and Ishmael rebuilt the house. So Ishmael had come of age; he was ready to work. So anyway, but Ishmael was a grown man by those standards, which are more reasonable than ours, before Isaac was born. Okay, so Isaac was never Abraham's only son. Okay, so we need to understand these things. Um, so what is interesting, and I'll try to finish up with this, is that imams in their talk on this occasion 4 days ago will talk about that Allah had told Abraham that he should sacrifice his son. This is what it says in the book of Genesis, which I don't accept as authentic. Okay? Um, these people, those people, had lost the scriptures that were sent to them. They accused Moses of losing it. They accused, the Quran, it makes it perfectly clear when he saw his people dancing, worshiping, serving the calf, the golden calf, he put the scriptures aside. And then after his anger had subsided, after he dealt with the situation, he picked up the scriptures. Okay. And, as far as I know, in the biblical scriptures, he just lost it. He just lost the message. But, they're accusing Moses of something, which they are guilty of. They lost it. And you can read the Bible and you see where, this comes up. King Josiah, I believe one of the last kings, or maybe the last king before the Babylonian invasion. They said, we found the scriptures in this building or wherever, in something or other. And I mean, how at such a late date can they find I mean, but this is, so the Bible was not put together, the Bible that we have, the Tanakh, the Old Testament, until the Babylonian captivity. Okay? And the people started calling themselves Jews. Jew is short for Judean. They started calling themselves Jews. They Judah after the land of Judah, which was the name of the country, but the people themselves were called the Israel, the children of Israel. And you go back centuries and centuries and centuries, Israel was Abraham's grandson. So Abraham was not even an Israelite, right? He was not even an Israelite. He surrendered to Allah. The word for surrender is Muslim, okay? he was not an Israelite, and he certainly wasn't a Jew because Judah was one of his great grandsons, one of the sons of Isaac, excuse me, one of the sons of Jacob, who was also known as Israel. Okay, so um, we have these imams who will repeat this thing, which is in the book of Genesis, which is not authentic, saying that Allah had said to, that God had said to Abraham that he needed to sacrifice his son. Nowhere, I mean, even in this passage in the Quran, the name Allah is not mentioned. And Abraham, it says, he saw in his manam, in his sleep, um, that he should do this thing. So, the Bible uses the word tempt, that God tempted Abraham. Really? Really? Is this what we think of the one who created us? Is this what we think our situation is? The Greeks believed that the gods just played with people, that they just played with people the way, mischievous people play with flies or other small creatures, They believe the gods, the gods just played with people. I mean, it's just what they did. And there was nothing you could do about it, right? If you study the story of Oedipus, I mean, oh, such a vicious thing to play on people. But at any rate, just the whole idea that the creator of the heavens and the earth would tempt us, really? Uh, I like that expression. You got another think coming. Um, these guys, after all these, the people did not become Muslims, calling themselves Muslims, until after the Quran came down, right? The Quran came down, and the people who began calling themselves Muslims, they learned the Quran, and this made them Muslims. As Warathuddin Muhammad said, words make people, and Allah has sent us an Arabic Quran. Those are the words that make us Muslims. Now, the Muslims have gone way off the track. I'm trying to save my own life. I'm trying to save my own life. And I can't do that by following the Muslims. As best I can tell, there might be 1% of the Muslims in the world, not just here in the United States, not just here in the English speaking country. In the world, there might be 1% of the Muslims who are actually reading the Arabic Quran. I could be wrong. Inshallah, it would be nice, but I am so convinced of the power of the word of Allah that if so much as 10% of the Muslims were reading this book, reciting this book, the world would be transformed, right? Let alone 90 or 100%. Um, those of us who are African Americans, we are descended by way of the Middle Passage from nations. Some of those nations are nations where 80% of the men could read Arabic. The languages may have been, well, the Fula is one of the languages, one of the prominent ones. Most of the Fulani people were Muslim and are Muslim today. Um, and 80% of the men were reciting Quran, only 20% of the women. Excuse me, I've got that wrong. MashaAllah. 100% of the men among the Muslim Fulani and some of those nations, Huta Jalong, Huta, Toro, and Bondu are three of the nations that I know of. 100% of the men were literate in Arabic, and they were literate in Arabic primarily so that they could read the Quran, and also so that they could communicate in the language of learned people all the way from the Atlantic coast of what is now Senegal to the Pacific, Central Asia, India, to the Pacific coast. By the time our people were being brought here, Indonesia was predominantly Muslim, to the Pacific coast of Indonesia. You could communicate in Arabic to all of those people, right? You could write books so histories of the Swahili coast, histories of the Fulani people, histories of the Philippines are written in Arabic. Okay. Um, our people, my people, um, are descended from people who were literate in Arabic, and some of them There was a man who was a merchant, just a common merchant, who had memorized the entire Quran, and probably not the only one, but he's one for which we have some biographical information specifically about him. Um, the middle passage so messed with us. We just forgot everything. We forgot the names of our parents. It was so terrible. We forgot the names of our nations, our families. I mean, just absolutely ridiculous. Then we get here and they tell us who we are, and what they tell us is absolutely ridiculously untrue about being a different race, and all of this kind, illiterate, subhuman, and on and on. But at any rate, these imams keep repeating this thing that God, in effect, tempted Abraham to see if, of course, Allah knows the secrets of the heart. He didn't have to tempt Abraham to find out if Abraham was willing to sacrifice his son. He knew that. He always knew it. Um, why play that game with a human being? It was a terrible, terrible game to play with a human being. He has one son. He's 85 years old. His wife is old and seemingly barren. Um, why play such a vicious game with a human? And this is what people believe. They're teaching this, at the Eid observations. Now if more of the Muslims would actually read the Quran for themselves, they could correct this mistake, right? So I mean, years ago, I was in New York and I heard this. I left New York over 20 years ago, and I just heard it online. Imams saying this. So this is what we need to do. We need to read the Quran. It was sent to all human beings. And those of us who call ourselves Muslims, we are taking an oath that we're not fulfilling. We say we surrender to Allah. Well, He gave us a command. Read this book, and it's in Arabic. Okay? MashaAllah. Uh, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. Say He, Allah, is one. Uh, Allah is self-sufficient. Homad, that means totally self-sufficient, doesn't need anything, doesn't need time, space, matter, energy. He doesn't need any of this, doesn't need it. Um, Lam yadid walam yulad. He does not beget, nor is he begotten. Walam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad. And there is absolutely nothing like him. Okay? Surely Allah speaks the truth. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.